working for the man, spinning my wheels, got bills to pay. I'm going nowhere faster, I can't catch a break, I'm burnt out.
Hello 55 and out community. This is part 2 about how my wife and I picked a financial advisor to help us reach our goals. But before we get into that, let's run the disclaimer. When we came back into the office a couple weeks later for our follow-up meeting, they wanted to make sure that we understood that they were fiduciaries. I didn't know all the details about the term, but I understood a fiduciary essentially means they're supposed to be looking out for us. Here's an actual definition screen of what a fiduciary is. So, they're on our side. I don't know how you measure that or actually track that to know that they are, but they're not supposed to be taking advantage of us, getting us charged for things that we didn't want or didn't need. Okay, makes sense. That's a good thing. As our meeting started, they were very prepared. We covered mutual fund recommendations, plans for growth, plans for our retirement, how do we create multi-generational wealth so that we have money left over to pass to our children and to our grandchildren. They put us on a path for getting our will created and also a path for actually generating a trust. These were the main things that I was looking for that I couldn't figure out on my own, or even if I could, I wouldn't know if I was doing it correctly. So far, they were off to a good start. I was always generally pretty risky and aggressive in my investment strategy through my company's 401k plans. One thing you should know is your 401k plan probably offers you plans that are called 2030, 2040, 2050. This is generally based upon the year that you anticipate you'll be ready to retire. The older you get, the less aggressive your funds naturally become. They start putting you more into bonds, into safer securities, and start slowing down your growth, but balancing that against safety, against loss. Personally, I was feeling always like I was behind and I needed to catch up. I was not interested in doing a 2030, 2040 plan. I needed growth and I needed to go. Based upon their answers to our questions and the recommendations I had from outsiders, we were ready to go. We decided to go all in with the financial advisor. One of the best things for my wife and I with this financial company was the fact that we were a smaller fish in a pretty big pond. It allowed us to ask questions like, well, how are the really rich people invested? And my fiduciary financial advisor would tell me, Scott, you're invested in the exact same things that they are. The only difference is they might own 10 shares of something and you own 1. But you are leveraged the exact same way that those people are. Cool. Then if you remember in the end of 2019, when that thing happened where we're all locked in our homes and panicked and worried that the entire economy and everything else that was important to us was going to fail, there were probably at least 2 or 3 times where my wife and I would call our financial advisor and say, we just heard such and such. If the government does this, is that going to happen? I said, what are the really rich people doing? And he would just calmly tell us, Scott and Wendy, they're writing it out. They don't panic over the highs and lows. They're in it for the long haul. They're sitting still. Okay, then so will we. Man, am I glad we did. We did very well through those years, but we also had great confidence that we were doing it the right way. If my wife and I were still on our own, we would have moved everything we probably had to secured, and during those years would have probably seen a return of 4 to 5%. We did way better than the 4 to 5% that we would have gotten on our own. So I was talking to a friend of mine about our financial advisor, and they said, I just can't see hiring a financial advisor and paying them 2 to 3% or whatever their commissions and fees are. I could do it myself. I said, yeah, you could. I said, but let me give you an example. Through my 401k at my employer, I'm in the most aggressive, best funds they have, and I earned 19% last year. It's a pretty good year. But the money that my financial advisor is managing did 29% this year. And they were like, oh. I said, yeah. I said, I can afford a few percentage points off the top when they're killing it and doing so much better for the options than I have. So how have we done with our financial advisor? Well, they would be the first to admit that we've had a pretty good run. And they would also be the first to admit that some of the returns we've gotten are not indicative of the overall longevity and history of the stock market. But when I said we got 29% last year, we've done better. And better than we could have on our own. Based upon that and my experience and just the trust factor of being able to bounce questions off of them and keeping them from panicking when we shouldn't and knowing when to write it out and when to move our money, I would highly encourage those of you that have money outside of your own company's 401k, do some research and find yourself a good financial advisor. It has paid out very well for us, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. One of the best things we've ever done. With that, a little bit of housekeeping. Where's Dennis? I have heard that Dennis is in Costa Rica, and I'm not sure when he's returning. But that is your weekly Dennis update. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and I hope to see you next week. Thank you.